Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa bil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin.
Um,
On behalf of the Talim Committee, Doctors Aisha El-Amin and Gloria Bashir, Sister Rashida Fitzpatrick, my name is Lionel Allen Jr., and I am honored to moderate today's panel. 50 years ago, in 1975, Imam Wharf-Dean Muhammad succeeded his father, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as the leader of the Nation of Islam, and began one of the most significant transitions in modern American religious history. Imam Muhammad, as you all know, guided our community towards the teachings and practice of universal Sunni Islam, and reoriented our community towards a deep study of the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Uh, in my opinion, not enough has been shared about his leadership, about the impact that he has had. And so it is with great humility and gratitude that I moderate what will be a panel discussion today, where we begin to scratch the surface of Imam Muhammad's life and legacy. So today we have on our panel our dear brother Rob Bashir, who has been instrumental in establishing Imam Muhammad Day, which we know we'll be celebrating on September 5th. I'm sure he's going to want to shout that out a little bit later on today. We have our dear brother Clyde El-Amin, longtime educator and leader in our community. And we have also joining us our resident Imam, Tariq El-Amin, who I don't think has joined us yet. But we're going to go ahead and get started with the hopes that he's able to join us very briefly. I have a couple of prepared questions to begin the conversation, but those who ever watch me moderate a panel know I like to sort of flow organically. So I don't like to go into any space ill prepared. So I do have a couple questions that will start us off. But we're gonna let this flow. And so my hope and prayer is that as I begin to pose questions, that our panelists will say something that will spark another question or spark a comment to keep the conversation going. So I'm hoping that you all are okay with that. And then towards the end of our time together, and again, we are going to be wrapping around 2 o'clock today. I'm going to invite panelists, I'm sorry, the audience members, excuse me, to also pose questions. If you would like to do so throughout the conversation, feel free to use the chat feature. If you are familiar and comfortable with that, you can do that during the discussion, and I will do my best to try to pose those questions to the panelists. Otherwise, again, we'll wait to the very end and allow members who are joining us to unmute themselves and pose their questions then. So with that, I'm going to ask that Brother Rod and Brother Clyde get ready to jump in, and I'm going to pose the first question. Um, so those of us who were not around in 1975, I found myself often very curious about that time. So I'm going to ask the two of you, based on what you know, what you've heard, or what you experienced, to take us back to 1975 at the dawn of what we now know as sort of the second resurrection. Can you give us a sense of the atmosphere and the spiritual climate within the African American Muslim community at this time? And give us a sense of how the community responded to uh, Imam Muhammad's leadership. If we could start there, and then again, hopefully by that time, Imam Tariq will have joined us, and we'll take it from there. I'll ask that either Brother Cloud or Brother Rye unmute themselves and respond to that first question.
I don't, first of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Bismillah.
I pray that Allah really guides me in this panel, because right now it's probably number one in terms of the panels that I've been on that have been intimidating. Because most intimidating. And that is because I have so much respect for the people that are on here that make up this audience, because any of them, any one of them, any two of them could do this better than me probably. But I know we do it best when we all do it together.
That's right.
So I'm sharing a pretty narrow perspective, actually, initially in my initial response. I think one of the things that people probably don't really get is how ready we were for Imam Worth D. Muhammad upon the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I think the media misses that, sometimes accidentally, sometimes purposely. But we don't have to miss it. And certainly I know Sister Latifah is on here, if you were reading our paper, you would not have felt that it was a real stretch at all that we moved from the official leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and moved to the leadership of Imam Worth Muhammad. Because for months, he was doing the teaching. He was the lead teacher. He had clearly been designated, and we had very clearly and definitively accepted him in that role before his father passed. And I think some of the particulars that made it smoother, and I know this is Allah at work. When the Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed, a lot of the believers were on their way to Chicago for Savior's Day. And they didn't have a bus full of cell phones back then either. So I'm sure some people knew, but it all happened, and it was happening in such an obviously divine order to me. Now, this is to me, that it was clearly Allah's will. So coming to Savior's Day and seeing the Imam voted or confirmed, or there's another term I'm looking for right now, as the leader, seemed to be the most natural thing in the world to us. I think if anybody was disappointed, it might have been the press, because they were looking for a much more explosive story that never came. Even in terms of language, we had been prepared by Imam Worth Muhammad, because our language was already changing. Our language didn't start changing the day he was officially named the leader. Our language was already changing, and so it was the most natural thing in the world to me, and most of the believers that I was in communication with at that time. It seemed the most natural thing in the world. It seemed elevating to me, So I'll let Rod jump in. I won't say any more than that.
Thank you, Brother Clyde.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I want to co-sign with what the comments that Brother Clyde just spoke about. And as you opened up, Dr. Lionel, you opened with Al-Fatiha, and it was Imam Muhammad who taught us Al-Fatiha. And I think that was, the one of the beginnings of the direction that we were going in. But I also agree with Brother Clyde that the language was already changing, and that the Imam's father, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, had been preparing us for a change. And the Imam had lectured in other parts of the country, particularly in Philadelphia and other places, prior to becoming the leader of the Nation of Islam. I was, in 1973 and in 1974, I was still in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I graduated from high school in 1975 and moved here, and was on my way to college in 1975. This was in June, July, August of 1975. And so I had a chance to experience the Imam's leadership in his presence for a few months before going on to college. But I remember in one of the lectures he gave prior to my leaving for college, he actually addressed those of us who were on our way to college. And he said that you know, he obviously wanted us to get an education, but to keep in mind that we were not at the fountain of knowledge. And I went into college with that idea in mind, and I think it prepared me tremendously for what I was about to experience in college. But in reference to your question about the environment, the spiritual environment, I think there was great anticipation in the community as it relates to the Imam's leadership. What direction would the Nation of Islam take? I think that question was asked in all quarters of American society, in the civil rights movement, obviously, with the Reverend Jesse Jackson and others who were anticipating the Imam's leadership, the American government, who had a very important strategic interest in the direction of the Nation of Islam, particularly coming out of our old strategic teachings of the white man is the devil, and the cocoon that we were in as a community, where the audience was strictly people of African American descent. And so there was great interest in what direction we would take. But I recall the Imam, and we'll get to this question, I know, at some point. He mentioned that he was not actually looking for men. He was looking for empty vessels to put men into. And that is a very important part of the psychology, or the focus on the internal person as opposed to the external person that we all benefit from now. And another statement you made, Dr. Lionel, regarding the Imam was how he, how he moved from the old teaching, from the first resurrection to the second resurrection. What was the focus? Would the focus be on the internal being, or the emotional makeup of our people? And I think he focused on the psychology and the spiritual makeup of our people more than the emotional makeup, where and I'll go so far as to say that our church teachings made us more emotional than rational in religion.
Yeah. So before we bring Imam Tariq in, both of you mentioned that the language was changing around that time. Can you give us some specific examples of those language changes? What exactly are you referring to?
Well, I will mention something that we still talk about now. The language such as words make people, concepts, concepts that come to your mind are actually words, and those words have the potential to form a human being in that body. Words like remake the world, which has more than one meaning. Remake our own world as individuals, and remake the world outside of us that would accommodate the person that's being created for that world. And there are many other concepts that he expounded on that I'm sure others will talk about.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind to me, the only one that you didn't mention, is something as basic but profound in implication as man means mind. You're not just talking about a body, you're not talking about a particular gender, you say man means mind. Humans in mind. I mean, the Imam took us to intellectual levels that I think I'm still appreciating now, that I didn't understand then, how powerful those elevations were.
Yeah. Thank you. Imam Tariq, thank you for joining us. We are still discussing the sort of the first question that I posed, which is sort of taking a look back at 1975, at the beginning or the dawn of the second resurrection, when Imam Mohammad fully steps forward as the leader of our community, and trying to gain a greater sense of what the climate and the atmosphere was like in the African American community at that time.
Thank you, Dr. Lionel. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
My apologies for my late arrival. I don't know if that was a tongue-in-cheek thank you for joining us or not, but
no, not at all. Not at
all. I would like to speak to this question from someone who was a direct beneficiary of that transition. 1975, I was a whole 2 years old. So my experience has been one that's just been shaped by that transformation without necessarily realizing until much later on that a transformation had taken place. We were having a conversation yesterday after Fajr prayer, and somehow we were talking about education, and I think it was Brother Clyde or Imam Rabbani, one of the two mentioned the Latin root. Yeah, it was Imam Rabbani who gave us the Latin root, right? It was educere, right? Yeah. Which is to draw out. And when I think about this idea of education, right, its intention being to draw out the potential within the individual and community, by extension, community, I think about the Imam's ability to put that into action. And as a proud and a grateful product of the Sister Clara Muhammad school system, which was under his leadership, I recall looking back at it, that there was an expectation and a preparation for leadership amongst the student body. And one of the ways that I think that was expressed was just as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad brought on Professor Jamil Diab to teach Arabic, we had Sister Nusrat Butt, who taught us. But it wasn't just the manner of teaching, it was also that there was an expectation of a delivery of what had been deposited. So I would get these speeches that after classes, Sister Nusrat, she would give us these speeches that were 9, 7, 8, 9 pages long. Arabic with English and Arabic, right? So I would memorize these, and I would get up and I would present at, I think maybe I'm 9, 10 years old, 11 years old at this point, and I'm doing this. And this question actually brought me back to that. And what it showed me was that there was, as I said, there was it was an intentional, because I don't believe any of these things happened outside of his counsel, his direction. There was an intentional preparation for leadership. The expectation, number one, not to be awed by it, not to be cowed by it, but to embrace it, to expect it as a natural result of study, is that you have to present what you have studied. And the other thing that I would say is that was a time of, for me, during this time of transformation, it was a time of intense fulfillment with and comfort in my own skin, which is not something that is not always typical of the African American experience in Islam here in the United States of America, with so many things that are pulling on us, not really being comfortable in our own identity, believing that we have to conform to some other cultural expression and aligning that with Islam, and sometimes allowing that to replace Islam, that I found myself in a very unique and appreciable position in that we were fully Muslim, fully African American, fully Black folk. We had our basketball games. We went skating. There was a choir at one point early on. I would think I'm old enough to remember some of that. And these spoke to a very critical and intentionality in his leadership. And that is and later on, I would understand, I would see some of the differences, some of the some of the elements of transitions that were taking place, because those were not things that were present in the first, right? There was an intentional removal of our community from a lot of the things that we associated with the church, the things that we associated with secular life. And then once we had been properly seasoned and prepared, we were able to go back and take the good, right? Take those things that had communal value and reintegrate those things, and not to lose those identifiable markers of our own cultural expression, particularly through the arts and through song, and to intentionally reintegrate those things. And it is interesting that the Imam's leadership was really ahead of its time in that regard, and also trailblazing for the rest of Muslims in America. So it allowed for other people to catch up some 20, 30 minutes, 30 years later. But it was an environment of, like I said, of security, an environment where it was a preparation for leadership, and so much more. So I'll stop there.
So, you just spoke to, and Brother Clyde, I don't know if you want to jump in and respond to something that the Imam Tariq said.
One thing I'd say that moved me,
go ahead,
that made me really almost want to open my mouth. In the old days, we might say shout, was his point about making us comfortable in our identity as African Americans, and making sure that we did not feel the need to take on another culture in order to be Muslims. Because honestly, that had been the pit that many people who did not come through the Nation of Islam, who were calling themselves Muslims while we were in the Nation of Islam phase, they took pride in an identity that they had taken on that wasn't necessarily required to be a Muslim. And I think Brother Imam made a good point. I think that was because of the insecurity in cultural identity that African Americans had, and just saying you're a Muslim and beginning to do those things outwardly that Muslims do did not require you to give up your dress. Obviously, you had to use Islamic standards, to give up the rest of your culture in order to be Muslims. Imam Muhammad made that very clear, and he made it very easy for us to do that. And it didn't mean that we didn't have any association with Muslims who came from other cultures. Sister Nusra was probably Pakistani or that family of people. But we knew to take the excellence from them, not to take a new identity from them, to bring the excellence from ourselves and contribute that to the world community of Islam and the cultures in the world community of Al-Islam. I thought that was very important. And I think it also, I know just enough psychology to say the Imam Warthi Muhammad, among the things he was a brilliant psychologist. And I don't call myself a psychologist. I know what a psychologist is. I know, I'm confident in that,
Yeah, so I'm hearing both of you speak to sort of the shaping of African-American Muslim identity in this country. Can we talk a little bit more about that in particular, but also the ways in which Imam Muhammad shaped the identity of Muslims outside of the African-American community? What impact did he have on, our brothers and sisters from overseas who came to the United States and to practice Islam, or were already practicing Islam, but were coming to the United States as Muslims?
I think the focus on making it comfortable, or at least acceptable, for Muslims outside of our community to feel that they could be Muslims in America. They were no longer Sam when their name was Suleiman, or some other Islamic name, but for whatever reason felt uncomfortable using their names. I think the Imam played a tremendous role in that comfort level. But even before the Imam, with our pioneers, who were very outward in their Islam, although it was not Islam proper, it still provided an environment for those who were not from America to have some sense of comfort in this environment. The other thing I think the Imam focused on, and there was not a lot of talk about this in the 1970s, and that was the language of the human being. That was considered weak. That was considered weak language at that time, from my perspective. But once he started to explain, the human being from the Islamic perspective, it became more and more acceptable. And I think the language, that was a tremendous language change coming from him. And I think that benefited America. It benefited those who were coming here from other cultures who were perhaps closer to being human beings than many of the Americans were.
I would add on to that as well, is that the Imam's leadership, I think, was instrumental. It was pivotal with regard to interfaith relations.
Yes.
And a lot of that is just baked into our own experiences as broadly as African-American Muslims, considering that the majority of our families are Christian. So that there was Brother Clyde, why don't you go? I'll come after you. I got some noise over here.
Okay. I think another thing that another aspect of the Imam's impact, and it's related to what Imam Tariq was talking about, is his impact on culture and the academy or academia. That impact is still there, but it's hard for people to identify it. But the example I can give that I think almost everyone here can connect with, Naeem Akbar was one of the leading psychologists, Black psychologists in America. He was in our community at the time. And I knew a little bit about his career because I was in that quote unquote crowd that was advocating Black psychology, et cetera, right before I came into the Nation of Islam. And actually he taught adolescent psychology to me when I was a student at Michigan, and he was a graduate student. And he ended up coming into the Nation of Islam about maybe a year after I did, maybe two. And there's a series of books that he wrote that really were funded, I mean, literally funded by Imam Muhammad. There was another, he brought there are a number of intellectuals that he brought into an opportunity to be truly independent. Other people provide research money for people to do research, for intellectuals to publish, et cetera, et cetera. And Imam was very forward thinking in having our community do that with intellectuals in our community to go out and influence their fields of study. And he did a series of books that were actually underwritten pretty much by, I would say, our community, with the Imam's leadership in doing so. And that catapulted him to a whole nother level. And he was already at a pretty high level in academia and had a great influence on academia, and how particularly Black psychologists looked at psychology, but how all psychologists looked at psychology. And he had that kind of influence on academia. And there were similar influences that he had in government and business, et cetera. I mean, most of us have heard about him being invited to do the invocation at the Senate, and invited to the Pentagon, et cetera. He went there. It was a natural outgrowth of the fact that he had the courage to pick up the American flag when everybody else had put it down, and really address the true foundations of America. America had foundations that were true, and America had foundations that were lies. Okay, he brought back to the forefront the truths on which America was founded, when that was the most unpopular thing to do almost in America at the time. And then there was his influence on not just, when I say higher education, I'm also including the religious community, because the religious community has its own hierarchy in terms of, intellectual levels. He was invited. He didn't go knocking on the door. He was invited because they saw the light and the wisdom in what he was teaching. They appreciated his understanding. I'm sure they appreciated more than I did, because I was not a theologian. I didn't know a lot about theological literature at the time. And we're still seeing that in interfaith, in the world of interfaith, and in the world of religious, quote unquote, academic institutions. I know Imam Tariq you're involved with Chicago CTS now. And CTS has evolved a lot. And I don't think its evolution is at all separate from the influence that Imam Muhammad had.
Yeah. Imam Tariq, you want to jump in? I know you were getting ready to make a comment.
Yeah. Got to deal with the natives. So carrying on that logic, and also something that Brother Rod mentioned, I believe earlier, which was about the emotionalism that had been considered, basically part and parcel of the African American church experience. And this also does relate to the broader Muslim community, right? How the Imam's leadership, his language, how this all had a transformational impact, right, on America. I want to begin by looking at what it did in interfaith circles. It required that when Allah tells us to come to, okay, my video is choppy. Maybe I just cut my video off. All right, so it allowed for us to, it allowed for, when Allah tells us to come, let us come to common terms as between us and you, that we believe, there's only one God. We don't erect saints from among ourselves. This is in effect a blueprint for interfaith engagement, right? To set the stage, set the parameters for how we will engage. And within the religious marketplace, so to speak, there was an appeal more often than not, either to emotionalism or to rote memorization in terms of a litany. And the Imam's leadership and his language was such that it caused an evolution in not just an evolution in the thinking, the expression, and the leadership that religious leaders had within their own communities, but also it raised the stakes of engagement when those communities came together. So one of the things that the Imam, one of the leadership positions that he had, because his leadership and his expression, his understanding of scripture and its application for society at large, not just his own community, it was recognized in his leadership position with the World Parliament of World Religions. I believe he served as the president for some time, and a number of other bodies that he would work with. The other thing that I want to lift up is, I don't know if we mentioned Clyde. Well, I'm not going to mention Clyde right now. I want to go to, as other Muslims began to immigrate more en masse, and we know we've had Muslims here different from around the world prior to 65, right? So that's established. But we do recognize that there's a wave of folks who came in that wanted to practice as, to be Muslim, have their Muslim identity, but did not necessarily know how to engage with a non-Muslim majority. There were concerns that they had. They wanted to do dawah, but those who chose to go out and do dawah, but didn't necessarily know how to articulate, how to translate these Arabic concepts into English expression. They didn't necessarily have the idiom. Imam Muhammad spent the majority of his public career speaking the Quran in English, right? He used Arabic, but he had this mastery, the ability to articulate these Arabic, these Quranic concepts into English. And what it did for, I believe, for immigrant Muslims, for lack of a better term, it allowed for them to understand the importance of being versed in the English expression, to have a respect for its ability to connect with native English speakers. And I think that's also something that continues to be an ongoing effort, right? Where it's not just about you coming in and learning some Arabic. It's about you understanding the concepts It's about your understanding, what is the root direction that that this is supposed to take you in. So from the outside, external and to the internal, his leadership was transformational in many ways. And I'll just mention Craig. I'm going to stop here, but the effort to specifically to go into our churches, our families' churches, and have them look critically at this idea of a representation of the divine. It was extremely important in the evolution of the Black Christian church and their engagement with Scripture and what was supposed to be an intended outcome for those that they serve.
So I'm going to pose a question that might not be popular, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why was the transformation necessary? Like at its height, we know that the Nation of Islam not only was it sort of readily identifiable by people, Muslim, non-Muslims alike, but if you were affiliated with the nation, there was a certain level of respect that you were given almost on sight, particularly in the Black community. There was a sense of empowerment and strength when people would see the men and women of the Nation of Islam. So tell me, why was this transformation necessary, particularly when you think about how, and I'm speaking from personal experience, as a kid who grew up in the 90s, searching for direction, uh, I was never exposed to Imam Muhammad, but I did know about the nation, right? I did know about the nation, and I'm sure there's reasons why that was. Um, but tell me, was anything lost in this transformation from what most of us grew up understanding the Nation of Islam to be, and with this sort of transition to Sunni Islam, a more sort of universalist, take on Islam as a religion? Do we lose anything in that transition? And I'm talking about the African American community in general.
I think for me, the answer to that question would depend on how far do you want to go.
Okay.
If you want to just create a situation where you are a power base or some other economic base or whatever the base might be in America, then that's one avenue to perceive the Nation of Islam. But if you want to be consistent in all of your roles or all of your being, then you cannot be consistent in yourself with a limited view of what power is or what respect is, etc. The Imam's role was to reestablish us after we had been disestablished through slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination, psychological warfare. Although Imam Tariq didn't talk about CRAID the way I'm about to mention it, but CRAID was a committee that the Imam set up. It's an acronym for committee
to remove all images
all images that attempt to portray the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And then essentially the Caucasian image of Christ on the cross, which still haunts us in so many ways today that some of us really haven't really focused on. So his role was to take that psychology that had been placed into us out. The Nation of Islam, in its approach to it, had a role to play in that, you point out that, for example, the white man is the devil, and that might turn you away from it, but not really. It's a heavier psychology than just pointing out the behavior of a people. There's a psychology that permeates our society today. In fact, one of the things I was reading about the Imam just recently, he said we live in a cycle of suicidal death because many of us believe that because a particular person paid the price for our sins, that we can do a lot of things that we should not be doing as human beings that's not conducive to our growth. So the Nation of Islam's approach was important. It was important for a time, but it was not long lasting as Al-Islam is. And I'll stop here with one other comment. The Imam has said that Al-Islam is going to outlive America.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big concept. And we can talk about that if we want to later, but these are very big, broad concepts that the Imam was light years on, ahead of us on, and we're still catching up.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is really important that maybe we don't talk about enough, and I can't obviously generalize and say that I'm representing everybody's experience who's either on this panel or in this audience, but actually the Imam encouraged us to get closer to the community, to get back in touch with and integrate it into our families, not to separate from them, to go back into to actually have a greater influence and play a role, because we don't stop being responsible for our families because we become Muslims. You know, most of us at most 10-15% of our families in terms of our entire extended family are Muslims. Most of us are from Christian majority families, even to this day. But under the Nation of Islam, I think there was a lot more visibility, but I don't think there was a lot more interaction, quality interaction that was transformative as there was as we progressed and as we evolved into what we are now. I mean, most of us maintain really good relationships with our relatives, and we actually have more opportunity to have exchanges with them. We are more approachable, and we are approaching more if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
You know, so I understand the symbolic power of that you're speaking of, because I mean, after all, I was a young man and I saw the Nation of Islam, the soldiers downtown Detroit selling those papers, and it had an influence on me. It probably had something to do with the steps that I took toward coming to the Nation of Islam.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, most people that I knew that had a Muslim in their family under the Nation of Islam, they were not in a certain, there was a certain quality of that relationship that I think was improved tremendously as we moved into the next phase.
Yes.
The Imam or the Muhammad.
Yeah.
Other people's experience may be different, but that's how I saw it. And I know that's one of the things he intended, because I heard him say that a number of times.
Yeah. Thank you for framing it that way. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? I hope I was clear. I was clear.
Yeah. The difference between the symbolic nature of the nation. There is power in visibility, but there's also power in creating really authentic quality interactions and engagement with the community at large, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim. Brother and ma'am, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say that it's also indicative of the time and the stage of our social, our psychological, and communal development, that a public expression was necessary, it was needed. People needed to see what appears to be a united, a galvanized force, disciplined, beautiful, together, material establishment. There are things that people needed to see just for them to understand the possibility. I'm going to stop for a quick second. I'm going to just divert back to, before I continue this point, to say that one of the, because Sister Latifah put it in the chat, I did want to mention that one of, that was transformational for our community, but for the Muslim community at large, was the inclusion of women in leadership, to show a balanced community life, expression. I think that was a tremendous addition and offering, for all of us. All
Yeah.
right, so let me finish this point that I'm making.
Before you finish, before you jump in, brother, man, I want to ask that Sister Latifa consider being on next week's panel. Inshallah. I just want to put my plug out there for you, Sister Latifa. We can talk more
Second
about
that.
it offline. Go ahead, brother, man.
All right, so I'll be quick. I intend to be quick. I think whether it was Marcus Garvey in New York, the huge parade that they would have, right? Moving forward, you know, the Nation of Islam, and you've already mentioned, you know, the outward expression, what people got to see. And there could be a sense of loss for some when they feel like, you know, well, I don't get to see it, right? The issue is, or the point is, for you to know what is possible. It is already possible. But at this point in our evolution, it was to understand, you know, you got to understand the rules in Pharaoh's house. If you don't understand the rules in Pharaoh's house, then you will leave Pharaoh's house shirtless. And Pharaoh's house is built on division. It is built on divide and conquer. And our community has seen the results of that division and how, as a centralized force, a centralized community, everything that could be done was done to undo it, you know, with the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We now came to a point where we had to understand the importance of not only our individual communal autonomy, but having regard to maintain those connections broadly, right? Having those connections broadly, and to be dedicated towards a shared mission. So I think that mission has been there, but I believe the evolution was that there was it was without necessary. It was out some of the outward trappings. There's more I could definitely say on this in terms of the identity that we had and some of the accomplishments that people may have kind of held on to and identified with within the transition. But those things were some of those things had to be let go for us to move to the next level.
Thank you. Got a couple comments. Yes, Sister Latifa say in the nation we had a unity of dress, and what was needed is unity of mind and purpose. Yeah, thank you, Sister Latifa. And Imam Shahid says the Nation of Islam was not the end game, and that's why we had to keep evolving. Thanks so much. I do have a question from Brother Bill that I want to pose, and if anyone else has questions, again, please put them in the chat. We are running up on the end of our time together today. Brother Bill asks, were there any tensions with Minister Farrakhan at that time, or did those tensions present themselves later?
I'll take a stab at it unless someone really jumping to do that.
Go ahead, Brother Clyde. I do have a comment on it.
They were not as outward as they became. I'll put it that way. I'll share an experience with you guys. I was selected to attend Minister Farrakhan's first sermon the Sunday after the burial of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he declared his support for Imam Muhammad Muhammad in that sermon, stating that he was the most mature Muslim among us, and that everybody could agree that he was the most mature Muslim among us. And he gave a very spirited and I would assume, and at that time perhaps it was sincere sermon supporting the leadership of Imam Muhammad. And he did remain in the community for about 2 years, because he and I were on the Imam set up a committee structure. One of the committees was the Muhammad Speaks Then committee. I was on that committee. And then there was an overall committee of people who were in charge of the different aspects of the community. I was on the committee representing the schools. It was called the Decision-Making Committee, because the Imam was introducing Shura. You know, he didn't use that term, but we knew that's what it was. Those of us who knew that term knew that's what it was. Minister Farrakhan was there for 2 years, and then Minister Farrakhan, he left, and then the rebirth of the Nation of Islam happened sometime after he actually stepped away. So it wasn't a lot of noise and clamor kind of thing at all. Certainly not for those first 2 years or so. And I know there are other people on here who had positions also that could either validate or, you know, clear up or question what I'm saying, but that was what I saw up close.
Well, no one knows what's going on. No, I'm sorry. And no one knows what's actually going on inside a person.
Right.
And Minister Farrakhan was the most visible of ministers in our community and well respected. But it is my view that much of what happened, if you're talking about tensions, was motivated externally by those who were pointing to people who they thought would lead the Nation of Islam upon the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Even Malcolm in his autobiography mentioned that if something were to happen to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that Minister Wallace was the most qualified to lead the community. So it was already out there that that the Imam was being put in a position to lead this community. But again, those who had ulterior motives were motivating others. And Minister Farrakhan, Muhammad Ali, Jabbar Muhammad, those were the people that were mentioned as successors to Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But all of them voiced their support for Imam Muhammad. So the tensions did not come about, at least outwardly, until much later.
Thank you, Brother Rod. I see Brother Bashir has his hand up. I want to bring him in. And then after that, I'm going to have Dr. Ramadan jump in as well. Brother Bashir. Brother Bashir, I don't know if you're talking. If you are, you're muted. Okay, while we're waiting for Brother Bashir, Dr. Ramadan, Assalamu alaikum.
His hand is still up. Okay, I guess he's muted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you see me or hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to just make a couple comments regarding the discussion before our time runs out. I very much appreciated the entire discussion. One thing I do feel that was not touched upon is most of the discussion has been from the Chicago perspective of that time. During the time of the transition of the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I was 27 years old and considered myself hardcore Nation of Islam at that time. All right. Definitely Fruit of Islam. We were in the field soldiering. And before coming up, we had sold Muhammad Speaks. And we came up and we had heard only little about how sick the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was. And the idea of him passing did not occur to us out there. And the preparation that you all have addressed so beautifully, we did not have that benefit at all. Okay, the majority of us. When we got here and learned that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had passed, that was shocking. And we didn't know which way to turn, right, left. All we could do was stand at ease. And those of us at that time were so very proud of our community that we did stand at ease. And we trusted our leadership at that time. And we trusted Allah that He would carry us through this time. I'm speaking of the feeling of those that were around me and many of us from outside of Chicago. And when we witnessed the holding up Imam Warithdin Muhammad on the shoulders of all of those leaders in our community, we were so very proud. And that was, for many of us, the beginning Okay, whereas many of you have watched the Imam's development over a period of time, we did not. It was if it would have been rumored, it was stopped at the minister. The believers in the community, we didn't know about it. So it was beautiful how Imam Muhammad gently brought us out of the nation, with the language, the chief minister language, the divine mind language, all of that 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 sort of eked us out of the nation and those old concepts that were deeply embedded. Many of us were willing to give our lives for those concepts, okay? And many had. So the Imam gently did that and brought us to Al-Islam, and in a community, we gave the Shahada. And that is the process that was beautifully done. And, addressing that from outside of Chicago is key because it's where a great portion of the rest of the community was. And to not describe that is a big oversight. So I just wanted to add that, and that I had been president on the national decision-making boards with Minister Farrakhan and all of those communities boards that the Imam had established. He invited me to be on, and I witnessed his leadership at that level too. And alhamdulillah, there's much to be said, but our time is running out, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, Dr.
That's
Ramadan.
subhanallah. Allahu Akbar.
Brother Bashir, are you able to unmute?
He got a sign say he's not able to unmute. He's unable to unmute. That's what he
Okay.
said.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ramadan, for that insight. And again, we certainly did not mean to commit that oversight. There's just so much to discuss and to cover when it comes to the leadership of Imam Muhammad. I'm going to ask our panelists if there's any sort of final words or thoughts they want to share before we get ready to close out. And I'll throw in just a not so shameless plug that we're going to continue this conversation, inshallah. Next Sunday, we have two panelists already confirmed, Imam Rabbani and again, brother Bashir have both agreed to participate. I would love if you have someone in mind who you think should be a part of this conversation, please let me know. And if you are interested in participating yourself, please let me know that as well. I try to keep the panel discussions to about 3 to 4 people, but again, interested in knowing if there's other folk who might be interested in sharing their insights and perspectives on this really, really robust topic. Brother Clyde, Brother Rod, and Ma'am Tariq, are there any final words you want to share before we get ready to close out?
Yes.
Real quickly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We knew from the beginning that this conversation could not be exhaustive.
That's right.
There is what Dr. Ramadan referred to is in my notes, but I knew we would not be able to get to everything. And the next panel is not going to get to everything because there's just so much to cover. Two things I'd like to point out. One is that the Imam's language, logic on the religious community and how he influenced the religious community, not just in America but throughout the world. And lastly, in our trip to Philadelphia for the 50th anniversary observance, one of the panelists mentioned, I think it may have been Sister Layla, who in a conversation with her father, she asked, how would he want to be remembered? And he told her, according to her, that he wanted to be remembered as a man of moral courage.
The only other thing I'd say is we should at least know what other people know or hear about Imam Warthi Muhammad. And I find myself just going to his Wikipedia page every now and then because it's always being updated and changed. And every time I go there, I'm saying like, wow, I forgot that. Or I didn't know that. So we want to know at least what everybody else knows about our leader. So I'd say just Wikipedia page, Wallace D. Muhammad, Wikipedia page.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It's a long one.
They're older people.
Imam Tariq, do you want to? You're muted if you are getting ready to speak.
Yeah, I was just rambling away. So thank you, Dr. Lionel, for convening this panel. I'll make an observation related back to Philly. The Imam's presence there, his leadership, and what Imam Dr. Ramadan spoke about, which is to see the Imam's leadership not from a local sense, not from a strictly religious sense, but to see it as its presence and expression broadly in every aspect of society, which is what our faith actually pushes us to do, right? To be fully enmeshed and a part of society. So my parting thing would be that I think Philly was a great representation of that, where you had this beautiful edifice, but you also had members from our community who were part of the state government, city government, and the economic, business space, school. So, and these are the things that we want to think about when we think about the Imam's leadership and language and expression, it having a real and tangible, a tangible expression for us. And that's what we're working for when we say, give them a good future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Don't forget the meeting following this meeting regarding Imam W.D. Muhammad Day. There is a link that went out to some people. Everybody may not have it, but everybody's welcome to that meeting.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much, panelists, Brother Clyde, Brother Rod, and Imam Tariq. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives. Again, I want to underscore something that Brother Rod said, which is we knew that this discussion could not be exhaustive. I can see you teaching an entire course just on the leadership of Imam Muhammad and his impact and legacy. And my hope is that we continue to speak his name and to educate our community, particularly the younger members of our community on his legacy. So go ahead, Brother Imam, jump in. Imam Tariq, jump in.
Very quickly, just to that point right there, the Islamic Leadership Development Institute, I believe that's the name for it, headed by Dr. Bashir Ali and a number of other esteemed individuals in our community. They have a program. I think it's a 2-year course, which is wonderful. I think it is applicable for anybody in our community to really be, I guess, ingrained and abreast of what the Imam's leadership looked like, his language, all of those things. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
Well, thank you. There is a course, I guess, that is educating folks on the life and legacy and impact of Imam Muhammad. So with that, we'll close out again. Special thanks to our panelists. Give them a virtual round of applause. Thank you all for, again, for sharing your insights and experiences. Again, we will continue this conversation with a new set of panelists, inshallah, next Sunday for our Talim on August 17th. And again, we look forward to as many of you that can make it joining us, and bring a friend. The more the merrier. We want to make sure that we are educating those both inside our community but also outside of our community on the legacy of this wonderful man. Let's close out with Allah, sir. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Wallah, sir. Inna al-insana lafi kusra. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati. Wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr.
Amin.